Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to speak. The time is also very timely for Latvia because we are about to embrace on a new change. We are changing our ballot papers, which is first time in, since Latvia regained independence. And I will try to explain a little bit about our voting system, which is different to you. I'm actually a little bit envious of Estonia because your system is, to my mind, very simple. And so I will talk a little bit about our system. I will talk about our current or old ballot papers. And I will also explain why we're changing them and what the ballot papers will look like. In fact, the legislation was changed only last Thursday, so this is very, very fresh, very new, and this is one of the first demonstrations, public demonstrations, where we'll be talking about our ballot papers. So the reason why we're changing is, unfortunately, as it goes, when you have one sole supplier who has been developing your system since 2011, and this sole supplier is in no way connected to government nor government institutions, lots of things can happen. They can decide to sell their business, they can decide to go bust, they can decide to emerge with someone else if they wish to do so. And in our case, I took on my position at the beginning of last year, beginning of February. And I arrived at the CEC, Latvian Central Election Commission, where the situation was such as there were no systems at all. We had nothing. And the relationship with this particular sole person have gone. Also, the government or government institutions really didn't have any knowledge in terms how these systems operated, how they worked. So they really relied on this sole private enterprise. So I guess we were left in a situation that we had to quickly decide what and how we would do. Also, of course, in 2022, the war started, the geopolitical situation changed drastically. And of course, that also we had to take into account what to do next, and also think about the way we're going to go forward and associated risks. So my last time in Tallinn was last year in March at your parliament elections as an observer, and I have to confess that I found the whole program, and thanks to Arne and his team, very uplifting, very interesting. I gained a lot of knowledge about how your systems work. And my thought was, when we build something new, we have to go to a uniform platform where all IT systems for the government, because there are many, they have to be in one place. So we started to think about the change going from individual modules, meaning individual modules, each election system has got its own module, but also, of course, there are referendums and various other voting systems, voting mechanisms. And the thought process was we have to build something that's all in one place. Also, part of the system that we did have, that we did lose with this sole company, private enterprise, was direct voter register. In Latvia, people can choose any region, any polling stations where you can vote. You get scanned in the system, Simply you can identify, or the election commission identifies whether you have voted before, you haven't voted before, you get checked and you get registered. So in a way, it's really, really great for our people. Let's say you go on a holiday and you can choose to leave, I guess, let's say Tallinn, you want to go to Tartu, and you can vote in Tartu if you wish to do so. So it's sort of an easy way for Latvian people to do. The same thing applies to overseas as well. Overseas, we have polling stations. We also have polling stations that are made of Latvian citizens. They're actually not official government, but they're made by Latvian citizens. And we have dual citizenship, so people can actually vote overseas as well if they wish to do so, by post or also by self-made groups, election commissions. So, and the next chapter, we thought we should shift from that single supplier to a government agency, and all digital solutions have to be in one place. So the voting process in Latvia is, I guess, similar in a way, but different because we have very different, you will see later on, ballot papers. So when a person goes to a polling station, like I say, you can go to any polling station that you like, your personal ID, which is ID or passport, gets scanned upon entering the polling station. Then your ID is double checked and signed at reception, this double checking point that works. Each voter receives ballot papers for all political parties. So we have each political party, let's say you might have 16, you have 16 separate ballot papers, and it depends how many candidates are on ballot papers. So usually there could be about 20, 21. On larger ones you might even have about 60, which is the capital city, Riga. Then the voter chooses one ballot paper, so this is the representing one party, and the ballot paper is placed in a pre-stamped envelope, and then the voter drops the envelope into the ballot box. An extra thing that we have, and I was before the session, I was talking to your colleague, and we're discussing that we have quite a unique opportunity in Latvia, which is kind of complicated for the people who work in commissions, but it's an extra thing for voters. We as voters can say, I really, really support this candidate, and you can put a cross against the person's name, or you might say, I really dislike and I do not trust this candidate, and you can cross that person out. Or, of course, you can have which is a neutral mark. If you do not wish to express anything at all, you just leave it the way it is. So people have said, does it work? Yes, it does work. And in actual fact, this is just recently when we had the EU elections, our ex-Prime Minister was also running for EU from one of the parties, but at the time he wasn't particularly popular, so he got to so many strikes that he didn't get there at all, even though he was on the top of the list. So he was pretty much just crossed out. Also, all politicians learn at the end, and it's official, it's publicised as well. You see how many crosses each gets and how many minuses. So in a way, it's an extra democratic thing that we can do. For polling stations, of course, it's an extra difficulty that they need to do, as opposed to in Estonia's case, it's just a number that you write in. From what I understand, it's just one person. So the challenges that we've had in our electoral process with the ballot papers, what you see on far end there is what we call the current paper, which is now being replaced. So the X represents a number of the party. There's a party name of the left-hand side, and each number is a candidate's name and a surname. There's also like a square at the end, and this is where used to people make their mark. If they liked someone, they would put a plus in there, or if they disliked, they would not have to, which is the challenging thing, is you don't do anything in that square, but you had to cross the person's name and surname out. So it was it wasn't that straightforward, I suppose. So as I said, these ballot papers were in force since the restoration of the Latvian state. And the challenges, as I just pointed out, were the insecurities in reading those special marks, so the for and the against. And particularly that came sort of very true when the scanners were used for counting purposes, because the scanners would pick up the minuses. Sometimes they didn't see them all. Sometimes the pluses would not necessarily be seen as pluses. Plus the scanners were really, about 10 years old, and technology changes as well. And believe it or not, even though every time, of course, it was explained how to properly mark the ballot papers, people still got confused. And I understand, because there's only one place where you can put the plus and the minus at the same time, so it's not that straightforward. And of course, at the very end, when the polling stations closed and when the election staff needed to count the papers, the election staff were kind of playing a little bit, I'd say, gods, because they had to decide on each ballot paper, do I really clearly understand the voters' will? What did they try to say? Then we had the issues with electronic vote counting. Well, difficulty in accurately applying electronic vote when counting when they're using scanners, as I just pointed out. The scanners would interpret the creases, because they would be folded on two sides, would understand as strike-throughs. So the frequent errors occurred. No one really talked about it that much, but there was a lot of work involved after hours by simply spending and understanding what the voter actually wanted to do, particularly when we talk about those fors and against. And the independent auditor did acknowledge that this method is not probably the best, to put it mildly, and particularly now that we're considering the situation, geopolitical risks, and people can I guess, you have to be sure that everyone's really honest, also how they interpret things. So that in terms of going forward, that probably wasn't the best way to do. So when we say the conclusion, we ended up with last year, the entire year, we had audits, we had independent audits, we had working groups. We also ended up with focus groups with voters in society, all age groups starting from 18 plus. We did middle sort of ages, and we also did elderly, senior citizens. We spoke to them. So it showed that really instead of strikes, the negative marks often drawn in the boxes sort of kept it inaccurate. So really was the time to look at a whole new system again. So what were the next steps? As I mentioned, there was a full audit on all systems. So looking at all modules separately, thinking about what we needed to do, thinking about the one platform perhaps, looking at whether anything is salvageable, whether it needs to be salvaged, meaning the old modules, the old systems, or do we just start with fresh and start new? So the decision was made to start new. Obviously, we need to do whatever the law says and how things need to be interpreted. But in a way, this unfortunate situation where we ended up with no systems gave us a fresh start. Meaning we changed the ownership. We transitioned from simply one private sole identity to government. Digital agency, which is now used to be the regional agency, now it's digital agency. And it is providing all IT solutions, more or less, in Latvia and various portals as well. Now, that doesn't mean that this government agency doesn't engage with private enterprises. Of course it does. But we need to look at minimizing risks and also keeping the knowledge within the country, particularly, and within the government organizations, because we're talking about critical infrastructure. So then it was decided that all IT solutions for all types of voting and public engagement, referendums, etc., will be made on this one platform in one place. But the platform needs to be adaptable, so anything new that comes in or changes can be added on. And of course, then we looked at, like we just discussed, the ballot papers, looking at all the challenges that we had in the past, looking at how we can make them more user-friendly in terms of interface for voters, but also for election commissions, how things can be counted, scanned faster, looking at new devices as well. So what we have now, so the new solution is what we say is a user-friendly ballot paper layout. And after this, I'll show you quickly as well, and we can all sort of discuss, even though I understand our system is more complex than Estonian. Instead of one column, there are two columns, for and against. We are introducing colors as well, red and green. For the colorblind people, there are about 10% in all societies. There are words par and pret, which is for and against. And also, there are no specific requirements for marking those columns. So previously, there had to be a cross in. Now it could be even a scribble or a tick, as simply it's done in the right place. But it doesn't really necessarily mean it needs to be particular type. So this is our new improved ballot paper. If you remember previously, there were those squares on the right-hand side. So now we have the green is for, yes, I really like this candidate. Red, of course, is against. Now, the person, of course, can decide to leave the whole sheet, the whole ballot paper unmarked as well. Just leave it the way it is and the whole party goes. Or you can have, let's say you might like the person number 8. You can mark them in that oval in there. Or you can have several people, you can have all of them, it's whatever you like. So it's really what we see as an extra step of an individual's voice. The barcode, you probably all know anyway, but barcode at the right-hand side is for the scanner, and it represents the party, which is on the opposite side. So this is in Latvian, but hopefully you can understand what it is. So as I mentioned, this is to demonstrate the fact that a scribble can do. We don't necessarily say people only a scribble can do, but marking the ballot paper, it can be, I guess, just as long as it's in the right area. So the scanner will pick it up. So the first going to say is for if you like someone in the green, or par for the colorblind people. The second row in the red is I really don't like. So make the mark there. And the third means you can leave the ballot paper untouched as you like it. So the new voting systems in place will be, well, there was a European Union as well, but that's already gone, didn't happen. We had to do it all manually. But the next elections that we have are municipal elections next year on the 7th of June, the exact day. And then we have our Saima or Parliament elections the year after, 2026, in October. So when hopefully we'll have a new parliament. So we're working now towards these new systems, new ballot papers, which is a huge change for us, because you don't change your ballot papers that frequently, will be in place as of next year. Aitäh. Thank you.
We do have a few minutes. Oh, you have questions. I like you.
Thank you for the presentation. Regarding the new design of the ballot paper, was there a specific reason why the green and red areas are on the far right end of the paper, very far away from the names? Would it not be better and easier to match the name to make sure I really put the cross next to the name I mean, if it would be on the left side, in front of the name, close to where the name begins?
There's a great science behind it. When the first time when we saw those ballot papers were changed several times as well, the columns were on the other side initially. They were right next to the number and the candidate's name. Believe it or not, a lot of politicians didn't like them. The reason being they might be crossed out and somebody might decide to cross them all out. So there was a very sensitive discussion about this, but it was mostly politicians. The reason why it is so long, it's been based on a candidate who had 70 characters in his name. Don't laugh, we laughed as well. 70 characters in his name. So in order to provide for everything and everyone, so it was decided to be one united, very long. I agree. It would be nicer to have it sort of short, but the decision after all was made that we have to accommodate in case there is a person with an extra long name or names.
Paldies, could you talk us through a little what other technological changes need to happen once you've changed the ballots in terms of the scanners, the tallying, because obviously the shape of what's being counted is so different. So what's the snowball effect, or what else needs to change, and what's your experience so far?
Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely correct. By introducing a new ballot paper, that's just the visible side that we see straight away. As I mentioned, not that just the old scanners were old, that were sort of more or less sort of designed for the old ballot papers, but also technologies changed. I mean, they change all the time. So nowadays there are more scanners that are more sensitive, in terms more adaptable to reading paper in ballots in particular ways as well. So we are buying scanners for each election commission, or election polling stations, I should say, because not just election commissions, because some election commissions have, there's one that has 45 polling stations as well. So there's new scanners that need to be done, but also what we believe is that there should be double cross-reference and checking. So machine reads the paper, so let's say in the scanner you might put 50 ballot papers in, and it scans all the papers. Then in the commission itself, so this is just the process how it goes, it gets counted in the polling station. Then at the election commission, might have a big screen, perhaps not as big as this, but each ballot paper is pulled up on the screen and it needs to be approved. Meaning, the ballot paper coming up on the screen will say, I understand this ballot paper is, well, let's say person 1 as 1 is like, 3 is dislike. Is that correct? And the Commission needs to say yes or no. So this is to prevent situations perhaps when the scanner has read it incorrectly, because at the end of the day, human eye is something that you can trust as well. So there's this double checking mechanism as well.
One last question.
May I ask, what's the price for the candidate who gets the most of dislikes?
They don't get elected. So this is really, as I mentioned, those pluses and minuses mean. They mean a lot, and people do exercise this right to express oneself, not just going to the polling station voting, selecting a party, but also making a mark. And politicians, they really fear this type of exercise. That's hence the reason why they said, I don't like the columns being too close, because they might put more minuses against my name. So, but it does work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking a trip.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.